In this episode, we are going to talk about the map function and how can we use it to solve common problems that we find every day in our code. Before we dive into it, let's find out what sort of problems it solves. Transformation of data inside a collection is one of the most common problems in programming. These two examples can show us transformation of data happening over a list of string and over a list of ints. They are basically the same code. The only thing that changes is the custom code that is applied to every element on the list. This is such a common problem that the standard library already offers us a function called map that can receive a callback with the transformation that will be applied in every element. Using map, we can solve the same problem, but this time with just one line. Map can be used over a list of strings, a list of ints, a list of custom objects. Map comes from the functional programming world, which advocates small immutable pure functions. Immutable functions are functions that don't mutate state. In other words, they can't cause side effects, one of the biggest villains in programming. Also, pure functions are functions that have their return values determined only by its imputed values. Let's put theory aside for a moment and focus on how can we implement this map function. So we are going to create this mymap function. It receives a parameter of the type array of ints and a transformer, which is a callback that receives an int and returns an int, and the function returns an array of int as expected. So what should we do here? First, we need to create this new var called new items, which is an empty int array, and then we are going to iterate over this list of elements that we received on the first parameter, and for each element we'll apply the transformation callback. It's important to notice here that this transformation callback allows us to delegate the responsibility of what happens to each item to the caller, which means the person who is calling the mymap function can choose what will happen with every element on the list. This transformation block is great because it allows us to have generic functions. It allows us to separate our function in two parts. The first one is static, responsible for the iteration by itself, and the second one, the callback, allows us to give the responsibility to the caller, which means the caller can define what will happen to every element on the list. Now that we know how to implement this map function and how to use it, we can't help to notice that it is a little bit different from the map function of the standard library that we saw in the beginning of this video. And why is that? Our map function was created as a global function that receives an array of objects and executes this transformation. To make it look a little more like the standard library, we can shift this code inside an extension on collection type, which means that every collection would benefit from this new function mymap, and we can change it to, instead of receiving these items as the first parameter, it will use it itself and over each value it will operate using the transformation callback. By doing so, we get now a implementation that looks much more like the standard library one.